The kind where you feel the sun drilling into your back even through your shirt. I'd been on shift since 5 in the morning, 3 serious calls before noon, and I was looking forward to clocking out. Then, my damn car decided to throw a tantrum right on Highway 51. Hood up and cursing under my breath, I glanced around, hoping for a miracle or at least a tow truck. That's when he pulled over. I didn't know it then, but Jake was going to change my life. Need some help, he called out, sauntering over with a grin that could knock you off your feet. He wore a simple tee and jeans, but carried himself like he owned the place. Yeah, thanks. It just died on me, I said, trying to keep my cool despite the heat. Jake nodded, his hands already diving under the hood. Let's see what you've got here. Your battery's connection's loose. Happens a lot in this heat. There you go, should be good now. I tried the ignition, and the engine roared back to life, a relief washing over me. Thank you. I thought I was going to be stuck here forever. No problem at all. It's too hot to leave someone stranded. You a nurse? He asked, nodding towards my uniform. Paramedic, I corrected him with a smile. Long shifts, lots of adrenaline, and not enough coffee. Jake laughed, a sound that filled the space between us comfortably. Sounds tough. I work construction, mostly on government buildings. So I get the long hours too. We chatted a bit more by the side of the road. It was one of those easy conversations that you don't expect to have with a complete stranger. Before we parted ways, Jake said, Robin, maybe I can take you out for coffee sometime? You can tell me more about being a paramedic, and I can bore you with stories about electrical codes. I found myself nodding before I even thought it through. I'd like that. We exchanged numbers, and as he drove away, I couldn't help the silly grin spreading across my face. Coffee turned into dinner, and dinner turned into late-night talks and walks along the river. Jake had a rough charm about him, a straightforward way of talking that made you listen. He didn't sugarcoat his words, didn't dress them up. And I liked that about him. We'd meet up whenever my shifts and his job sites allowed. It wasn't easy, both of us working odd hours, but it felt right whenever we found time together. A couple of months in, during a quiet moment overlooking the city lights from the park hill, Jake pulled a small box from his jacket. Robin, I ain't good with fancy speeches, he said, his voice rough like always. But I know a good thing when I see it, and I don't want to let go. Marry me? It was blunt, unexpected, and so very Jake. I said yes without a second thought. We didn't plan a big event, neither of us cared for that kind of show. Just a simple ceremony at the town hall with a few friends and his mom, who took to calling me daughter from day one. Settling into Jake's family home wasn't the honeymoon paradise some might expect, but it felt right, like I was finally where I belonged. The house was an old 2-story building with creaky floors and a cozy kind of clutter that made you feel at home the minute you walked in. The first morning I woke up there as Jake's wife felt surreal. I was nudged awake not by the blare of my alarm, but by the rich aroma of coffee brewing downstairs and the distant sound of Martha humming an old tune. I patted down, finding her in the kitchen, which was her kingdom, really. Morning, sunshine, Martha greeted without turning. Hope you like your coffee strong and your toast on the darker side. I wouldn't have it any other way, I replied, sliding onto a stool at the counter. This casual kitchen chatter became our morning ritual. It wasn't just about the breakfast, it was her way of checking in, making sure I was settling in okay without making a big fuss about it. Jake had already left for work, typical of his early starts. He tried to keep his construction gigs close to home, but some days he'd be gone before dawn, and not back till everyone else was turning in. It put a strain on us, sure, but we made it work. One evening, about a week after the wedding, I was folding laundry in the living room when Martha sat down across from me, her expression more serious than usual. You know, Robin, Jake's father was just like him when we were young. Always working, always making sure we had enough. Hard shoes to fill, but he's doing his best, she said, smoothing out a shirt I had just folded. I know he is. And I love him for it, I replied, catching her eye. It's not easy, but what's the point if it's not a bit of a challenge, right? Martha chuckled. That's the spirit. Just remember, this house is as much yours now as it is ours. Don't ever feel like you can't make your mark here. That meant the world to me. It wasn't long after that chat that I found out I was pregnant. The joy on Jake's face when I told him was something I'd freeze in time if I could. We were going to be parents, and suddenly, the house felt too small for all the love it had to hold. During those months, Martha taught me everything, from baby-proofing the house to managing night feeds. Her support was unwavering. The day our son was born, she was right there, handing me water, wiping my brow, and whispering words of encouragement. Bringing our son home was another chapter. I quit my job to stay home with him, thinking it'd be a breeze with all the stories and advice I had armed myself with. But nothing ever really prepares you for motherhood, does it? The sleepless nights, the constant worry, you name it, I felt it. After months of being at home with my son, I started feeling the walls close in on me. I loved my boy to bits, don't get me wrong, but there was a part of me that missed the rush of the ambulance, the urgency of saving lives, and the camaraderie with my team. I remember broaching the topic with Jake one evening after dinner. He was wiping down the table, a furrow between his brows like he always had when deep in thought or stress. Jake, I've been thinking about going back to work, just a couple of shifts a week, I said, watching his reaction closely. He paused, the cloth in his hand stopping mid-swipe. Work, huh? And what about the little guy? Who's gonna watch him? We could look into daycare, or maybe your mom could watch him, I suggested, trying to sound casual, though my stomach was tight with nerves. Jake sighed, tossing the cloth onto the counter with more force than necessary. Daycare? That's not happening. My boy isn't going to be raised by strangers. And mom's already doing enough around here. The conversation quickly turned tense. It's not about not wanting to be with our son. You know I love him. But I need something for myself too, Jake. I need to feel like I'm more than just a mom. Jake ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. And what about what I need? I need you here. We agreed on this, remember? When we decided to have a kid? I remembered, all right. But back then, I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd lose in the process. Things change, Jake. I didn't know I'd feel this way. He didn't respond right away, just stared out the window at the darkening yard. Finally, he muttered, Fine, Robin, do what you gotta do. But we're not doing daycare. Thankfully, Martha stepped in, bless her heart. I'll watch him, she declared one morning, having overheard one of our discussions. You go back to work. It'll do you good. With that settled, I started back part-time. The first day pulling on my uniform again felt like slipping back into my old skin. But the balancing act was harder than I'd anticipated. Work was demanding, and home was equally taxing. Jake's job took him away often, and when he was home, he was increasingly critical. You're never here anymore, he'd say, or, why is the house always a mess? The comment stung, especially when I was stretching myself thin trying to keep everyone happy. One night, standing over the sink scrubbing at a stubborn pot, I finally snapped. I can't do everything, Jake. I'm working, taking care of our son, trying to keep up with the house. What do you want from me? We glared at each other, the air thick between us. Then, without another word, Jake grabbed his coat and left, the door slamming shut behind him. The sound echoed, much like the gap growing between us. One cold evening, after a particularly grueling day, I found Jake sitting at the kitchen table, paper strewn about, his face buried in his hands. He didn't hear me come in. Long day? I asked, setting down my paramedic bag a little harder than necessary. Jake looked up, his eyes tired and red. Yeah, the site's behind schedule, and the foreman's on my back about it. It's all a mess. I poured myself a glass of water, feeling the weight of my own day bearing down. Tell me about it. Had a kid, no older than ours, come in with a broken arm. The screams just takes it out of you.